Hi, everybody. It's Chris and Lisa from Been There, Got Out. We are on for real this time. We have a feeling that James knows how to do it. Tonight's guest is James Peet. He's a certified fraud examiner in the state of Washington. He has clients all over the place. There he is. Yay.
And he's an incredibly interesting guy.
Yes. Okay, so let me just do the invite to join. Oh, your camera's on properly. Because now this is the, third or fourth time we've tried? There he is.
Hi there.
Chris is going to probably adjust it a little tiny bit. Okay. All right. Hi, James. Thank you so much for joining us. This is really exciting because you are the first certified fraud examiner. Am I saying that right?
You are.
Yeah, you're the first certified fraud examiner that we've interviewed live. And we just put up an article for the New York Times recently about divorce and money and how a lot of times it's hard to find cryptocurrency, which we'll talk about. But we know that with our audience in particular, one of the most popular behaviors of difficult people during a divorce is to hide assets. So we want to talk about that and all of your interesting techniques, because I know this live is going to be really helpful to a lot of our people right now, and also those who can't watch now but who are going to do the recording.
And we've had a couple of conversations with people we just met just yesterday and today that might be coming your way that have the exact issue that we talked about when we got our preparation call.
There seems to be a pretty common thread running through a lot of these that I see.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, which is the need for somebody who does this.
Okay, James, your camera is like all weird. Is that
It's like a little blurry.
Yeah, it's like kind of blurry. I don't know if you're trying to stay anonymous or like
No,
you're doing it on purpose.
Maybe
That's
it's
better.
just not allowing it. I'm not sure what's going on.
Okay. All right, now we can see you more clearly.
Yeah.
I guess it's just
Wait, is he frozen?
transmitting data and voice.
And you know what? Now the audio is breaking up a bit. Is there maybe something with your cell service or your Wi-Fi or something? Maybe it's a bad issue.
Well, the main issue, and mind you, I'm probably going to turn the phone around, is the fact that I live on top of a mountain outside of most cell phone service. So I'm using a cell phone booster. To give you an idea, this is the view from my house. Forest for like miles.
Okay, well, I think as long as we can hear you, then we're good. And now
Well,
we can see you clearly.
Yeah, I've got no problem hearing you guys, so that's all right. Nobody needs to see my face anyhow. It's not that good, so we'll just leave it at that.
Well,
all right.
Let's plow ahead.
Right. Okay, so let's get started. So one of the things that you said during our first meeting was that you like to help people getting screwed. So tell us what you mean and describe your work as a fraud examiner.
Okay, well, I used to be a police officer, as I mentioned in our conversation, a long time ago, back when the Earth was still forming out of that protoplasma stage. And one of the things about being a police officer is a lot of people go into it with the intention on helping people. But the fact of the matter is you really don't. I mean, it's a very rare event when you can actually help somebody. I could probably count on my hand the number of times I did it. One of them being is I pulled a lady off an 18-story balcony when she was trying to commit suicide one time. So I think I kind of helped her. At least I hope I did. But for the most part, all you're doing is taking reports and following up on crimes. And it's a pretty negative life. So if you ever see a police officer and he's or she is feeling kind of grouchy, just keep that in mind. But the thing I like about this job is that I'm actually able to help people who are basically being victims by finding money for them. I had a recent case, and I can't go into it in great detail or any detail, but it was a family matter where one family member, two family members were in a business. One was active, one was silent. And the active partner was saying, yeah, no, there's no money. We're not making any. And I went in and I got the documentation. I looked at everything that they had. And I said, oh, no, you owe a fair amount of money. So I actually got a nice thank you card from this person. I like that. So I'm helping people. And I help a lot of, especially women who are getting divorced and going through rough divorces, who are, well, let's face it, some husbands are not nice. and they will take money and they will hide it. Some wives are not nice. They will do the same thing. So usually in any partnership, there is one partner who is the financially literate partner, and then there is the non-financially literate partner. That doesn't mean they don't know what to do about finances. It just means that they're ignorant on what the finances are of the family because the other partner handles it. And when you have one partner who does all that, the other partner really doesn't know what's going on. They may not have access to the bank accounts. They may not know where the money's going. They may not see the savings accounts. But it's always a situation where you have one partner who will take on that role. I think Dave Ramsey has called them like the spreadsheet geek or something like that. I'm not sure of the exact terminology. In our household, it's me. I take on all the finances, and I'm the one who goes through the checkbooks and pays the bills because I'm the spreadsheet nut. My wife, on the other hand, she doesn't really pay attention to it, but every month, here are the bank statements. Here's where our money's going. It's like I don't even open them. I let her open them. That way she is fully cognizant of where all of our money is going. So,
but it's very easy when one partner is a bad actor, right? For them to not disclose the way you disclose in your healthy relationship, right?
Well, not all relationships are healthy. No, actually ours isn't bad. It's just, as you know, marriages go through these things like that. But yeah, it's as long as you're above board, there are very few problems that will arise. The problem, of course, is when the financially dominant partner is not above board. And next thing you know, business is horrible. I've got no money coming in, but you're just as busy as you were last year. Well, yeah, but I don't have any money coming in.
That is very familiar. Okay, so tell us some of the interesting places that spouses hide money.
Oh, there are many, 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 many ways. I actually have a nice little, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to go to my presentation that I actually give to accountants and to certified fraud divorce coaches or certified divorce coaches, which is the number of ways that spouses can hide money is innumerable. First thing, they could take cash. If they're taking cash and they're stashing it away someplace, it could be as easy as under a mattress. If they have a gun safe, it could be in the gun safe. They might create a diversion safe, such as something like that. It looks like a can of Barbasol shaving cream. Not that I've used anything like that for decades. Fake outlets. One of my favorite ones is that, let's say you decide to put it into gold. Well, where do you go for gold? Usually to a pawn shop or to a bullion dealer. What do you take with you? You take cash, you get your gold, and you keep buying gold and gold and gold, and then you can stash it. And I mentioned this to you guys. This is always one of my most favorite places to hide stuff, is if you have a chain link fence. They all have posts with little caps, and all you have to do is just take like a little bag, put the gold in it, tie it closed, have a string with a hook, put the hook on top of the remove the cap from the post, put the hook on top of the post, put the coins down into the post, and put the cap back. Very hard to find because, number one, most people won't look for it. And number two, if you are going to be looking for something using a metal detector, because my husband buried gold in the backyard, well, you're going up against a metal post. So things like that.
A more metal detector.
Right? Exactly. You need X-ray vision. You got to be Superman on this stuff. But that's just one way of doing it. Another way is buying things. Having that little midlife crisis going on. I need this toy. It's hidden in plain sight. It's a value. It's an asset that they're kind of putting the money into. But they also may be loaning money to friends. They could be buying cryptocurrency. They can open up bank accounts that you don't know about. They can open up brokerage accounts. They can be putting money into whole life policies to build up that whole life, which they can then later on draw out. The ways that people hide money are just innumerable. But the one thing about most of them is that they actually do leave a paper trail.
Right. Okay. So
speaking of that,
exactly. When would be the best time to hire a fraud examiner or investigator like you? And how would a person even know that it'd be worthwhile to talk to someone like you? What are the red flags?
There are a lot of red flags. Matter of fact, I have a whole list of them right here, which I love to share with everybody. First one is if the spouse is actually being very protective about collecting the mail. Why? Well, because the mail usually has bank statements. It usually has credit card statements. Although nowadays, a lot of that has actually moved into the online environment. So instead of being protective about collecting the mail, they become protective about passwords. They won't allow you access to a computer. Now, I know that a lot of us are winding up with biometric things that you actually have to turn it on and everything. But if the spouse isn't willing to share these kinds of financial information, I mean, they could just type in, I'll log in on you, bam, and here you go. Yeah, my wife and I, we share our passwords too, so it's not like we have anything hiding. But you're going to see missing mail like bank statements, credit card statements, brokerage statements. Mortgage statements, that's always a good one. Matter of fact, one case I'm working on right now, it's the mortgage got paid off. This wasn't a case of a man committing fraud against his wife. It was a case of elder abuse. In which case, now all of a sudden we have a mortgage paid off. That money was not supposed to come out of there. So, yeah, that one's going to be a fun one. And because now you're getting into, you mailed that payment in? That's mail fraud.
Wow.
Federal offenses. So right now I've got a couple of federal felonies on this gentleman. We'll see how it progresses. Other things they might do, like I said, they'll have loans to families and friends. You will see unexplained purchases, the big boy toys, or cash withdrawals. That's one thing to always look for. If you've got bank statements and all of a sudden you're seeing 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 coming out, and you're like, where is this money going? Well, it's going someplace that you don't see.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they're doing. As I mentioned, the increased computer security where they won't share the passwords, but also clearing the browser history is also a big one. Now, most of us clear our browser history once every, 5-10 years? You think about it.
Only when the computer slows down or something's wrong and it
Yeah, you get the blue
stuff, right?
screen of death, and you're like, "What now?" And you get onto Chrome, and it says, "Clear your browser cache." All right, so you do that. But if they're clearing their browser history all the time, you may have a red flag. In the immortal words of Jeff Foxworthy. So, other thing is if they're turning the screen so that you can't see it. If you walk into the room and they're on the computer, and all of a sudden they turn it, you have a red flag. It could be that they're just watching porn, but
That's what I was thinking for parts of this.
yeah. Well, generally speaking, and that's also an issue. I mean, sometimes people are into porn and they're, committing adultery or whatever, and they're trying to hide all that stuff. That's a very common phenomenon, unfortunately. Bank accounts. As I told you guys, my wife and I have several different bank accounts. I have my business, Peet and Associates, LLC, that, because it's an LLC, it has its own separate bank account, and I'm the only one on it. My wife is not on it, and I do have to check the charter to make sure she and my kids are listed as pay on death type thing. And please, if you have bank accounts or anything like that, get your pay on death beneficiary stuff updated. Take your other spouse off of it and put your kids on it or whatever. And the reason I know this is my mother just passed away, so we've been going through that whole issue of, okay, where are these funds going and all that fun stuff. So if they have their own bank account, and even more concerning is if all of a sudden your name is no longer on the bank account that you were on. If all of a sudden you're no longer having access, you're like, oh, what happened here? That's a pretty big red flag. Credit cards. If there are unknown credit cards out there that all of a sudden you're seeing statements for, or if you're getting credit cards that are in your name that you have no knowledge about. One thing I always recommend doing whenever I first get a client is run a credit report on yourself immediately and freeze your credit if you have to. This way they know what's out there for them, and hopefully there are no surprises. But although, unfortunately, there sometimes are. Yeah, looking for any documents, having them sign things really fast. It's here, I need you to sign this tax return.
Yeah.
Or
How familiar is that, everybody?
You're sitting there with the cereal in your mouth, milk's dripping down, and you're like, what? Sign it quick. I got to get it. They hand you the pen. You just sign your name. Bam, they're off and running. You have no idea what you signed. You're married. You trust this person.
Exactly.
So, that's one of the red flags too. if they have a PO box or a private mailbox that you don't have access to. Now, once again, I have a PO box for my business. Does my wife have access to it? Only if I allow her. I mean, technically she does, but I have to keep that separate because it is my business.
Mhm.
But she also knows that it's there. You know,
Right.
if they have a safe. Yeah, we were having this discussion last night, my wife and I. She doesn't want to know what's in my safe, but she has the actual combination for it. I gave it to her years ago when I got the safe. But if they have a safe and you don't have access to it,
Mm.
that's a sign they're hiding something. One case I worked
There's
on,
so many things I'm thinking about.
yeah,
So many
well,
things.
yeah, one case I worked on. Somehow the husband left the gun safe open, and so she took some pictures real quick, and I got a hold of the pictures, and we were able to identify all the different firearms that are in there. And by the way, yes, I am a firearms enthusiast. I shoot precision rifle, which means like over 1,000 yards type stuff. You know, it's a hobby of mine, and it's a fun one. And I hope I don't have to use it soon, the way things are going in the world.
Yeah.
But hiding cash is also another one. You know, if, like I said, if they're pulling out cash and you're not seeing it, you know, that is a considerable red flag. Um, there are other things that you need to look out for. You know, do they have a PayPal or a Venmo account? Um, I have a PayPal. God, I don't even know how many PayPal accounts I have. Probably 3 or 4, just because personal, business, and all that fun stuff. But once again, my wife knows about it. Does she have access to it? I don't know. You know, if she does, so what? She's not playing with my money. I'm, you know, because it's our money. Gambling is another big one. It's one case the husband is saying, "Oh, I don't have money for child support." And I'm looking, going, you lost $80,000 gambling this year. If you hadn't been gambling, you would have money for child support, wouldn't you? You know, things like that. Once again, getting those toys, the midlife crisis, the big boy toys. Oh,
How about
wait a
things
minute.
like artwork or stuff like that? Collectibles.
Artwork is a big one. Going to pawn shops. I'll get into that in just a second, though. But if they're just buying things like boats, motorcycles, usually it's the Harley Davidson, right? Got to get that big hog, blah, 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 blah. And which is funny because I just bought a motorcycle last week, and my wife's not happy about it, but she knew we've been talking about it for 20 plus years. So it was like I was waiting for the kids to get old enough where I can do it again. Business SIDS. SIDS is a big one. Sudden
Mhm.
income deficit syndrome. All of a sudden, their business income, you
Uh-huh.
know,
And
as Ryan Reynolds would
the
say,
timing that happens is so,
isn't
serendipitous.
it? Isn't it amazing? Just like the year before you get divorced
Yeah.
or separate or whatever, and you will always see that. I mean, on this case I had where the husband's saying, "I only make this much money per year," and it's like, "Oh, really?" Interesting how after that declaration, you just sold this big chunk of stuff and brought in $1 million.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes I enjoy what I do a lot. So, if they're getting their businesses incorporated in places like Delaware or Nevada, you know, that's a red flag. Not necessarily always a red flag, but it is a red flag. I mean, there are many companies that have a legitimate reason for going to those two locations, especially Delaware, because if you form an LLC in Delaware, the only way you're ever going to find out anything is if you actually get a subpoena issued,
Mm.
because that information is not available to the public. You know, I have a good buddy of mine who has his LLC registered in Delaware. He lives in Virginia. You know, I believe his wife knows about it. They've been together longer than my wife and I have. God, they got married in 1982. So that's usually a red flag. Traveling is also a red flag. If you see them traveling to Las Vegas, you may have a problem. I mean, a lot of people go to Las Vegas because they like to gamble and have fun. That's not something I quite understand because I don't like gambling because I know math enough to say, yeah, no. But
Mhm.
that's where you can go and you can actually form a corporation. If you're traveling overseas, take a look where they're going. If they're going to places like, the Grand Cayman Islands, Panama, Malta, you know, any of these places that are known as, well, the Cook Islands even, as good places to set up bank accounts that with a great deal of privacy, more than you would get in Switzerland.
Mhm.
So these are the kinds of things that you want to look for. When you're looking at the bank and credit card statements, the red flags that you're going to see there are going to be things like expenses that shouldn't be there. Casinos, lingerie stores, pawn shops, jewelry stores, gun stores, art studios, cryptocurrency. Believe it or not, people actually use their debit cards to purchase cryptocurrency. And it's not just online like everybody thinks, but there are actually ATM machines out there that you can go and buy them in. So I was talking to an attorney the other day who has worked on numerous high conflict divorce cases, and she had never even known this. I was like, oh, okay. Well, now you do. So these are the kinds of things. When you're looking at your bank statements and you see purchases, most of us live in a state where you have taxes. I think is New Hampshire probably the only state I believe without, and
Well,
Florida,
Florida
and
doesn't
Texas
have,
maybe.
Florida doesn't have state income tax.
Right. I'm just talking sales tax.
Uh,
If you look at a sales tax, I know not Connecticut, New Hampshire doesn't have it, but most of us do. So if you go buy a product that's on sale for 99 cents, it's not going to show up at 99 cents. If you buy a product that is on sale for $1, it's not going to show up as $1. If you buy something on sale for $500, it's not going to say $500. It's going to have whatever percentage of tax is taxed onto that. So let's say it's a 2% sales tax, which doesn't exist anywhere, maybe in a libertarian dream. But the fact is, actually, no, they like 0%, which I kind of like too. But if you have a 2% sales tax on $500, now all of a sudden you're talking, well, let's see, 2 times 5, 10 bucks right there. So you should be seeing 510, not 500.
Mm-hmm.
So
like round, easy numbers.
Yeah, and that's especially important when looking at checks, and especially if it's a business. If they have a business and they're writing all these checks for even numbers, that's usually not the case. I mean, there are some times when it is, such as you're giving a retainer for like my services or the services of an attorney or I don't know if it's divorce coach is how you guys operate on the financial front, but most investigators and accountants and attorneys always require an upfront retainer, usually of a rounded number. In some cases it's $2,500 or $5,000. In other cases, it's even more. So that's one of the things you want to look for. And also look for large sums being withdrawn and wire transfers. So that's one of the things we always look for. For example, on a case I'm working on, there's a case where money was taken out of an elder person's account to pay for securities through a wire transfer. And so I was able to put it all together where we see the certificate, we see where the money's going, the wire transfer, the money coming out of the person's bank account, false signatures, all this fun stuff.
Oh my God, I'm having so many flashbacks to my divorce.
I'm sorry.
I also got to see, no, that's fine. I mean, I got to see like my ex-father-in-law's credit cards because he was very old and sick at the time, and how, somehow his credit card bills went way up. And I knew what was going on. So I'm glad to hear you validating that.
Well,
there's a lot of that.
What about people who come to you and maybe it's a situation where they're suspicious that their spouse might be hiding money, that sort of thing, and maybe they have the impression that it's just as easy as like getting bank statements? What do you tell people like that?
Get the bank statements. Always start with the bank statements. We start there. And then we build from that. A lot of people will actually say, well, can you just like go find bank accounts for me? There's a little thing called the Graham-Bliley-Leach Act, the GBLA as we call it, that kind of restricts what banks can give out to companies. And there are very few exceptions. One of them, of course, being, to prevent fraud. And it's kind of tricky on how they view that, consumer fraud, et cetera. And you'll see a lot of companies advertising, we find bank accounts, we find assets. Well, you can't really do that without just cause. You can't just say, I think my husband's hiding assets, so can you do a bank search? No, we can't. Anybody who says that they can just do a bank search is going to be lying to you. If you're going to have a bank search done, you have to have a valid reason. You have to be able to say it meets the exemptions of the GBLA. Child support is actually one of them, court order. I always advocate get a court order, or once we identify fraud, then we can start going in information broker route and try and determine assets that exist out there that we are unable to locate through review of our documents.
Mhm.
But
And James, can you define fraud?
let's see, the intentional, I'm going to go up here and actually use the nice one on what the ACFE likes to say.
Mhm.
Wrongful or criminal deception intended to result in financial or personal gain.
Mm.
So that's it. Basically, using deception to take money from somebody or to take things from somebody. That deception could easily be using somebody's bank account ATM card, without their permission. So, and here's a topic that a lot of people don't understand, and I even have to explain this to accountants, which is the word forensic.
Mhm.
Forensic accountant. It sounds like, ooh, scary. Like what are those legal shows you always see on
Yeah.
TV, LA Law and all that? We're going to hire the forensic accountant. All forensic means is for the court. That's it. What you're doing is some accounting for the court, generally using what are called GAAP. I don't do GAAP because I studied under a different system, generally accepted accounting principles.
Mhm.
I actually studied under the International Financial Rules and whatever, IFRS, because my school said, oh, we're going to try this. And then after our cohort went through, they went, well, that was a failure. So we're not going to do that. We're going back to GAAP. I'm like, okay, great. So when I have to testify, it's like, no, I don't follow GAAP.
Mhm.
It's that simple. But the great thing about being a fraud investigator is that we're not using generally accepted accounting principles to identify fraud. We're just following the money and going where it leads us to. And usually we'll find stuff. I mean, we may be able to track money overseas, although that's extremely difficult.
Mhm. That's what I
Because,
was told.
yeah, the key thing to remember about any type of tracking is that you have to have a court order to get access to records. And a subpoena from Washington State means absolutely nothing in British Columbia, which is just across the U.S. border, or
Mhm.
U.S.-Canadian border, or Canadian-U.S. border, however you like to call it. The difference between A and just So, yeah, tracking those down. So you've got a forensic accountant is somebody who basically is just doing accounting for the court.
Mhm.
And you've got several types. You have the type who, was a bookkeeper and decided, hey, this is fun. I'll just hang on my shingle. They might have a couple of community college classes, and that's it. You might have somebody who's an actual CPA, certified public accountant, who has taken their entire course load of accounting classes and then did the additional accounting classes or business classes that would qualify them to sit for the CPA exam, and then taking the 4-part exam, and then worked for somebody for a year as a CPA to become a CPA. I did all that except for the exam and the working under somebody else. By the time I finished my accounting education, I was like, I'm in my 50s. I'm not going to go work for somebody for a year just for a test that I'm not really going to use all of it for. So, and then you might have somebody like myself who is a private investigator with accounting education and who is a certified fraud examiner. And for those of your listeners who don't know what a CFE is, I shall explain. It's too complicated. Let me sum up. Sorry, I'm full of movie quotes all the time. Even my
That's
students
okay.
hear it. A CFE is basically somebody who has got at least 2 years of fraud or fraud-related experience. This could be background checks, or it could be actual investigations of white-collar crime. Typically requires a bachelor's degree, and we have to take a 4-part test that is pretty intensive, basically looking at finances, investigations, crime prevention, and the legal component of it all. So you have an understanding. And once you pass all 4 parts and you get a 3 letters of character reference, then they say, yay, you're a CFE, which is pretty cool. And to maintain it, we, of course, have to get continuing professional education, just like attorneys, CPAs, and physicians. We're required to have 20 hours of CPE per year, 10 of which must be fraud, and 2 of it being ethics. So usually we wind up with more ethics than we need, because I don't understand why we're not attorneys. So
So
anyhow,
for example, if someone has, like a lot of people we know, they'll say, oh, I already have a forensic accountant, but what is the difference between, like, practically, what would be a benefit to hiring someone like you versus just the forensic accountant?
the biggest thing is that we're trained on investigating financial crimes. A lot of forensic accountants are not. You can be a CPA and get the Certified in Financial Forensics designation, CFF, but that doesn't focus on fraud. I mean, you're looking at things that are useful in court, valuations, tracing, which for a fraud investigator, tracing is different than what it is for a CPA involved in a divorce case. For somebody like myself, tracing means following the money. For a CPA doing evaluation for a breakup of a family, it's taking a look at what money was invested where, at what value, and what accrued independent of the community property. Which is completely different.
So there is like a criminal thing because of the fraud thing. So there's like a criminal.
Plus, there's the mindset. We have a tendency to be a little bit more suspicious. To give you an idea, the big joke that I heard one time was that the CPA would take a look at all the paperwork laid out in front of them, crunch the numbers, and say, "Yep, they all match." And then you have an auditor who goes out into the field and says, "Okay, they said they had 100 boxes of widgets. Yep, 100 boxes of widgets. Everything's good." The CFE would go and open the boxes. Oh, this one doesn't have anything in it. So that's the difference. CPAs are good at what they do. CFFs are good at what they do. Some forensic accountants who do not have bachelor's degrees are good at what they're doing. But once again, when you're hiring somebody to do something like this, you probably want a fraud investigator. If you're hiring somebody to evaluate a business, do a business valuation, you don't hire me, you hire somebody who does business valuations. So, matter of fact, I was meeting with an accountant this morning, where she was giving me flash drives to conduct a financial crime investigation, and she does business valuations, and it's like, oh, great. It's like, I now have somebody who can do business valuations.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the guy that used to do them died last year. This whole death thing is like sucks.
Yeah.
It's been pretty deathy.
I'm thinking too, in terms of that criminal element. We got a question earlier about, so say you discover there is a criminal element, there has been fraud. What impact would that have on a divorce case?
It comes in handy in many ways. Number one, if one spouse wants the other spouse to go to jail, that could happen. They could use it as leverage. In Washington State, as a private investigator, I'm not allowed to give details out on what I find in my investigations without the consent of the party who has hired me. So if I find fraud, it's like, I can't do anything about it, but you can as the client. So it actually gives leverage. And like, for example, one of the things that I do is when we get letters of interrogatories and they answer all those questions, or they're in a deposition, we take a look at what they're saying on the financial front and we compare it with what we have uncovered. And, it never looks good to the judge when you go in front of them and say, Your Honor, opposing counsel's client perjured himself 24 times in this document.
And that's familiar to many of us in these situations.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's where we help out. And excuse me while I take a drink of water.
That's okay. All right.
So let's say you do find a case where there are assets that have been hidden. It's secretive, malicious, whatever you want to call it. What recourse does someone have to go after those assets? Again, thinking in the context of a marriage that is ending, or.
Well, usually in a case like this, I recommend that they get a court order to freeze the assets, especially banking assets. I just find them. I don't get them. I'm sorry if I can't answer that any better, but yeah, having the assets frozen, or if it's a house, getting a lien placed on it, things like that. One case I had, somebody bought a house, and it was a business relationship. Or no, they bought a building, not a house, without telling the partner about it. They used the proceeds from the first business to buy building, which is not connected to the business building. So now we have this situation where it's like, okay, you've got this person's money tied up in your, this building right here. What are you going to do? And in a case like that, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But what's probably going to happen is either the subject is going to have to either pay the victim back, or they're probably going to sell the building, and the proceeds will be used to reimburse the victim.
Wow. That's great. Okay. You want me?
Sure. Well, so I remember when we had our first talk, we asked like, what does this type of service typically cost? And it became a discussion about like, how does someone decide if it's like worthwhile to bring in someone like you to investigate if that's the thing? So two-part question.
Yeah, it depends. It really does on who you hire, what their level of education is, what their level of experience is, how long they've been doing it, how confident you feel in them. Literally, the price could be anywhere from probably on the low end, $150 per hour to up to $500 per hour.
Mhm.
And you can expect let's see, I'm just trying to think of how. I have cases that are all over the place on time wise. I have done cases in under 10 hours, but that is so
Mhm.
rare, it's not funny.
Mhm.
I had one case, this was a business related case, mind you. I'm trying to think, that was well over 100 hours. But a marriage could be, figure on, you're probably going to spend between $10,000 and $20,000 for a good fraud investigation / forensic accounting.
Mhm.
If you're lucky, it's very minor, it's quick to resolve, it's under 5,000. So the question you have to ask yourself at this point, if you're the victim going, I don't have that money, what do I do? Well, how much money are you going to leave on the table out of this? You cannot be penny wise and pound foolish. You have to say, I need somebody who can actually do this. So, you know, some attorneys know people, they go, I know a good CPA. You want somebody who has experience with fraud if you suspect fraud. If you don't suspect fraud and the CPA is brought in to do a business valuation and they don't find any, don't go seeking it out. If everything looks above board. But if everything looks suspicious, all those red flags I brought up, if two or more of those red flags exist, you might want to consider it. At a very least, you could have somebody come in and do a brief consult, get the bank statements, whatever you can to them, and it'll cost a couple of $1,000s, but it's a lot better than, walking away from a marriage with no money.
Mhm.
Right.
The flip side of that is don't commit financial suicide. There are many people out there who will just expect, this is usually with the narcissistic type spouse who just thrive on chaos and will just keep on, hammering everything and everything and everything with court costs, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to the financial matter, let the professional do what they do and don't keep bringing stuff up. I have one case where this lady wants to bring in all this computer forensics, bring in a digital forensics expert, and she had already hired one. They didn't really find anything. And, she's like, well, maybe he's hiding stuff up in Canada. And it's like, I'm looking through the numbers going, there is no need to waste money on a digital forensics expert in this case. There are other cases where I'm like, yeah, bring them in. We had one case, and this is, I have to say, this is my premier case, and I can actually talk about the details because A, it's been published, and B, the guy got convicted. In which case we got the city manager of a small city in eastern Washington convicted of document destruction, which in Washington state is such a rare event. This was only the third time ever. So
Wow.
I'm quite proud of that one. And the issue on that one was the detective had long story short, city manager got fired by a new coming mayor, and he shredded everything, including trying to get rid of all the computer stuff. Well, the computers worked in a series of 3, so it was like 24 hours after events transpired, everything went to the second server, and then 24 hours later, it went to the third server, and 24 hours later, it was deleted, so everything was... The detective caught on to this really quick, went in, because the computer person had said, hey, the city manager is trying to delete stuff. And so he got a search warrant, pulled all the servers. And so I went through over 9,000 emails just reviewing this stuff to come up with about I want to say 130 or 150 emails that should have been retained. Each one of those would be considered a felony if you destroyed them. So that kind of thing, including we identified other documents that needed to be found that were missing. The city manager said that somebody stole his laptop, and we identified things that were on flash drives. So working with a digital forensics guy and myself going through 9,000 emails and all these bank statements and all these city records and finances, we put together a case and got him convicted.
Wow.
The funny part was he had just gotten hired at another city, full-time, permanent. They just offered him that position. He came home. There was the detective with the search warrant, and he went to jail that night.
Wow.
Needless to
How
say, he did not get the
satisfying.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know a lot of us aren't thinking about city managers. We're thinking about our exes, just
Yeah.
karma.
So
You know,
anyhow, that's
I want to ask you a quick question from something you said before. So, with the cost, you know, sometimes when someone's found in contempt or just in general, they get the victim can get the attorney's fees reimbursed.
Mhm.
Do you ever have it where somebody is able to get your fees reimbursed? Have you ever seen a judge do that? Yeah.
If you bring in an expert witness, a forensic accountant like myself, you know, we can usually see about getting opposing counsel to pay for them. But that's also, I believe, state dependent. In Washington state, that's allowed. I don't know if it is allowed in New York or in New Jersey. So you might want to check, have them check. That's one thing to ask for. You know, see if the court will order that, because this was required to prove the actual assets status, you know, which he had lied about, or she had lied about. You know, had we not brought in this accountant who cost $10,000 or $15,000, we would never have uncovered this. So usually they will require that.
I'm thinking exactly what you're talking about, but in terms of someone who refuses to comply with discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's a tough one because the court's going to order them. But I have seen so many cases where they just won't comply.
Yeah.
And it hurts. It hurts me because I can't do my job if I'm not getting the financial documents I want. And it hurts the victim. You know, the good thing is that there's the power of subpoena, and most of the things that we go after are bank records.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
So,
that's nice to hear.
And banks, like this happens with banks all the time, right? I mean, you show up with a subpoena, they're used to that.
yeah, they are. There are some companies that really are not fun to work with. For example, QuickBooks. I knew that there was QuickBooks files out there. We wanted QuickBooks file access. They're in California, the company, even though the client was here in Washington State using QuickBooks files. And they just went, no. In a case like that, what you actually have to do is get an attorney who is from that state to go to a court in that state and get the subpoena issued.
Wow. What a pain.
Yeah, and it costs money every time you do that. And it's just, my goal is to keep the cost down for my clients. And I know that the attorneys I work with are the same way. I'm very fortunate, as I have over the years connected with some really top-notch attorneys who care about their clients.
Mhm.
But as you're probably well aware, that your client, the opposing counsel is probably going to be like the spouse.
Yeah.
So
Almost always.
All of our people are just going, yeah, of
I-
course.
Yeah.
How'd you know?
So, and I don't know I worked one fraud case that was actually between two attorneys. And it's not often I tell my clients, you need a bulletproof jacket. But on that one I did. And she actually has her book out now. I wish I could say what it is, but now that I outed myself on it, I can't.
Interesting.
Darn.
Okay, so let's talk about, we're almost done, and I'm sorry, thanks for staying on so long. I was gonna
Oh, no
say,
problem.
one thing that I found fascinating is that you said that your cases virtually never end up in court, which to me thinks that's a huge amount of money saved. Why don't your
Yes.
cases ever go to court?
Because once we identify all the assets and all the fraud and everything like that, it's usually the opposing counsel tells their client, we need to settle.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I presume, because I never hear from them.
Uh-huh.
It's like I send the case off to my client's attorney, and then nothing, crickets. One thing that I do, actually, that a lot of forensic scientists and accountants don't do, is I have a meeting with both the client and the attorney when I get hired, because I want us all on the same page. And it also provides for that personal connection, which, it's one thing to send the accountant stuff, but when you actually have talked to the accountant, you know the accountant, and you know what the accountant wants. And I have an article I wrote for Pierce County Lawyer on working with forensic accountants, which I provide to any new attorney saying, I would like you to read this before our conference. And so they do. And I think it does a lot to bring to them the awareness of, number one, I'm a specialist. And it's sticker shock when you hire somebody like me, like when you're going to buy a brand new car and you haven't done it for 10 years and you're like, holy smokes, look at the cost of that thing. Yeah, but I'm a specialist, just like an attorney is, a physician or anybody else like that. And well, I have to also admit I'm a little different than most forensic accountants in that my PhD is not in accounting, and my sideline is writing science fiction novels. So, which Chris is like
You said
all
at the
over.
beginning, you're an interesting guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So lastly, James, how can people find you? You don't just work with clients in Washington State, do you?
No, I don't. Matter of fact, I have clients stretched across the United States, California, Virginia, places like that, Colorado. I can be reached just by going to my email, which is peetassociates.com. That's P-E-E-T, like the coffee, Peet's Coffee, associates.com. And just there's an info link. You can click on it, email me. My business phone number is 360-825-2661. Smoke signals generally do not work because I live in Washington and the rain will beat them down.
All right, awesome. So I'm going to post this recording.
Okay.
We'll
One
have
of the
your
things that
contact info there too.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. One of the things I do recommend is that if you're going to be working with a CFE, it doesn't have to be somebody in, your immediate locale. You can work with a CFE from anywhere. And doing high conflict divorce cases, such as I do, there's a strong learning curve. So you want to find somebody who's actually gotten involved in those, for the expertise. But I would also recommend local. Try to find somebody within your state, because some states like California, basically require you to have a PI license in California. And I'm like, no, I live in Washington. Number one, I don't have a PI license in California. Number two, I don't live in California. And number three, I'm not paying California taxes for work I do in Washington State. So what'll happen is I'll do the work, and then the council might hire an expert to review my material. So, and thanks to Zoom, well, these are court appearances now. Although I do wear a tie, not just a sweater and a Rolex undershirt.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and enlightening all of us.
Thanks. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to hang around for a couple of minutes and respond. I don't know.
Usually what they do is they'll send the questions later, or they'll just go straight to you.
Okay. Well, I'm here working on fraud.
Okay, great.
Actually, I got to walk my dogs. It's the rain has stopped.
Good. All right. So we'll catch up with you later, James, and thanks again.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate being on here and helping out as many people as we can.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Now, if I can figure out how to shut off on this thing.
All right.
We'll take care of it for you.
Okay. Bye.
Take care.
All right, bye.